Yay, interpretive dance! Just kidding. Not doing interpretive dance. But, what I learned in the interpreting class. I learned about consecutive and simultaneous interpreting. Basically, that consecutive interpreting is basically they talk and then you sign, or they sign and then you talk. Like, they kind of have said a thought and have paused and then you sign it. Whereas simultaneous is they just go and you just kind of are a little bit behind them, but you're just going as they're going, so you're going at the same time. I learned about different levels of meaning transfer. Literal being literally what they said, like you didn't change the form or anything, like it's still in the form is and the grammar is still in the source language. Modified literal is where you change it a little bit. There's some grammar changes. It's closer to the target language, but it's still not there. Idiomatic, which is what we want, is that you successfully changed the all of the grammar and the form from the source language into the target language, and you're using idiomatic speech from the target language and everything, and it's perfect. Well, not perfect, but whatever. Unduly free is basically you've added something or taken away something from the message that the speaker didn't intend. You either strengthened or you weakened the message, and you didn't go along with the speaker's goal of what, or you might have got their goal necessarily, but you didn't get the meaning and the message across. Something was lost somewhere. It went askew. Because we can't add, even if it makes it stronger, we can't add to the message. We can only do what they meant to say, or what they did say. Learned about different registers. Frozen being like, weddings, Star Spangled Banner, the pledge, stuff that never changes. Like, it's forever. Like, I guess you could sign it in a different way, because I have seen a few different signs for the Star Spangled Banner and whatnot. But, I mean, the words themselves are never going to change. Like, it's not, surprise, we're doing this today. Like, you know what the words are going to be. You can prepare for that and have it set up ahead of time. Formal, like a conference or scholarly thing where, usually there's an audience involved, like at a conference or something. So your signs have to be a lot bigger and more formal. Obviously, you don't want to use slang. You want to articulate well. Like if, was like, it maybe even like all the way up here, whereas like in casual, it's like down here, but you just want to do everything big and the sign space big, and not use anything inappropriate. Like, usually you don't want to cut. I mean, if the speaker cuss, I guess it's not usually happening in formal things. Usually they're using very scientific language and that kind of thing, but it's whatever. And then there's consultative, which is, more like doctor, patient, lawyer, client, that whole kind of thing. Usually it's like one higher person talking to another person, like this person wants information from the expert. And it's not so formal, but there's definitely it's not just like two people talk. It's not like generally two peers. Like, one person's generally higher than the other. There's conversational, which is, just, friends, acquaintance, that kind of thing, just chilling, just talking. Generally a smaller sign space, not so formal. Intimate, it's real tight, might be one-handed, very casual, not well articulated. If you're signing it might kind of be blurred together. There might be some inside jokes that maybe you don't know, which kind of makes it probably really hard to interpret for. And I think I already talked about the source language and the target language. The source language being what it was originally, like if there's a speaker and they're speaking English, that's the source language, and there's deaf people in the audience and they want ASL or PSE or whatever they want, that's your target language. So point A to point B. And basically you want literally like the picture that is in that speaker's head to be into that person's head, even though they don't speak the same language. Like you basically just want to pop off the brain, be like, that is what they meant. Not necessarily the words themselves, but the picture, the visualization, the idea, the concept that they had in their brain. That's what you want. That's what you want. Not the words themselves. You want the message, the meaning of what the concept was. Which goes into processing levels. There's lexical level, which is just the words. Like you're literally just being like, this is what this word was, this is what this word was, and boy went to the store, whatever. You're literally just going word by word. And then there's the phrasal level, which is just basically the just little tidbits at a time, not necessarily word by word, just kind of little tidbits. And then centennial, which is sentence by sentence. Textual, which is pretty much the whole message itself. It might be a little broken up from that, but generally it's the entire message. Ideally, it would be great if we could all work on the textual level always. In translation, we can do that because you have more time to do it. Obviously, in interpretation, you might not have that time to do that. Like if you're simultaneously interpreting, you might, if you don't know the whole text ahead of time, if it's not a more frozen speech, it's just conversational, then you're not going to be able to do it textually necessarily. You might try to do it, as far back as you can. Obviously, you really don't want to do lexical, even if it's simultaneous interpret. You really want to try not to do lexical. You want to at least back off them enough to at least get the basic phrases at a time, or even the sentences at a time, to really understand the message. Because if you're doing it word by word, then your message is probably going to be or it's not going to be very ASL, or it's not going to sound like very good English. If you're just doing it word by word by word. Learned about propositions. I had no idea what propositions were. No idea. Basically, it's the little parts of meaning from a text, and we learned about unpacking the propositions, which is basically like there might be this one little thing, or maybe not even something they said. Maybe it's just some implied, embedded message that you kind of have to get from that. It's like, well, what did they mean by that? What all the stuff does this entail? Like, if they used she for something, well, then you imply it's a woman or a girl, even though they didn't say this is a woman, you said she, so there you go. That's something that you've added, stuff that's implied, embedded in there. Learn about comprehension errors and production errors. Comprehension errors basically meaning that you didn't understand something, that something went askew and you didn't really understand what the message was. Production errors meaning that you made a mistake, you misspoke or you missigned, whichever be the case. Learned about expansion and compression. Expansion basically meaning that in ASL they tend to use contrasting, fasting, reiteration, using 3D space, explain by example, couching, and describe then do. And English tends to sum stuff up. Like ASL wants to explain stuff and go on, and English just wants to label. They want to label and say it and be done. But contrasting is basically doing the opposite. Black, the opposite. It's not clean, basically meaning it's dirty. Faceting, using a whole bunch of words for one word, like it's so nice and fancy, and just top of the line, and just all these words for the one meaning that you meant. Reiteration is basically bookending it. So saying it's dirty, dirty again. You're emphasizing the dirty by bookending it and reiterating it. Using 3D space, setting stuff up, just using your space accordingly, using it to visually show something. Explain by example, like fruit, banana, apple. Instead of just signing fruit, you could just, banana, apple, orange, that. Couching the nesting is basically like you have to set up a whole scenario before you can actually get to it. Like if you're trying to say barn, and I don't know if there's a sign for barn actually, but hypothetically there's no sign for barn. So you're trying to, on a farm, there's building and it's red, and the animals are in there and hay and all this stuff to explain barn. You have to set up this whole background before you can explain what you're talking about. And describe then do, pretty self-explanatory. Like if you're talking about baseball, you'd be like, oh, there's a ball and there's a bat and there's a whole bunch of like people, around. Maybe you want to set up the field, and then you want to be like, oh, now I'm playing baseball, catching baseball, whatever. You're talking about it, and then you're physically doing it with body classifiers and that whole kind of thing. I think that was pretty. I want to talk about the steps that we went through for translation, which I guess you wouldn't have to always use these steps, but because I know the packet was a little different. But what we did was, and I guess you wouldn't have time, but translation you do have the time to do this really, for the most part. But first you want to brainstorm. You have the topic and you want to get an idea of what should I expect. What do I think I'm going to see? What words, what the speaker's goal might be. Is it going to be formal or consultative? Just the whole thing of what you should prepare for, what you should keep in your mind for the text. And then we had random mapping, which we basically just kind of had an expo board and we were just writing stuff. And then we have the actual organized map, which is basically, you can either do like a Gish model or an outline or something like that, just to organize it, be like, introduction, body, and then break it up into little pieces and the conclusion, that whole kind of thing. And then we had retelling in the source language, which is basically like to make sure that you really understood it, to put it in your own words. You're not interpreting it yet, so you're not taking it into the target language, you're just re-expressing what they said or signed. And then we had the worksheet, or I call it the worksheet, the salient feature analysis, where you basically broke down everything and just found little things that you noticed that stood out to you, like maybe they used a certain vocabulary word or a classifier, or use of voice, something like that. And you had to say what the function of that was, like why they picked that word, or why they use that facial expression or classifier, what they were trying to express. And then 5 was illustration, which I really have no idea why that was 5. I really felt like it should have been 3 or 4, but whatever. It was weird to me that 6 was behind 5, but 6 was predicting it. So you basically go back to the salient feature analysis, go through all of those features, and predict what you think they will be in the target language. So yeah, it's just how you think it would be done in the target language. Like if something is emphasized a certain way in the source language, how you think it would be done in the target language, and that whole kind of thing. And yeah, and then there's the retelling in the target language. So you're kind of interpreting it, but it's more just your own kind of words. You're not taking into account register and everything. You're just kind of saying it in the target language. And then we had 2 texts, so we basically did everything over for the parallel text, all of the things that we had done. And then we did a compare and contrast of the 2 and how we felt and how they were different and that whole kind of thing. And Then we did our actual interpretations, our final interpretations and everything. So it was a really long process. It's a really long process, but we learned a lot. Like, all of this stuff I legitly learned. Like, it's not one of those classes where, like, oh, you have to talk about stuff you learned. I didn't really learn anything. Let me try to think hard about stuff. Like, there was a lot. And that's not even including, like, just random stuff we got from conversation and practicing and all the idiomatic language that we learned, mainly ASL. We didn't learn too much idioms in English, but I mean, we grow up learning idioms from English. ASL idioms we didn't necessarily know. So, I mean, we learned a lot. And, we learned a lot, especially about translations, which we will carry with us through interpretation. Because I feel like it was important to know translation before we knew interpretation, to have time to think about it and process it, so that when we actually interpret it and the time, is far less, we'll at least know what we should do and kind of do that process a little faster, but still kind of do that process at least halfway, think about it, and really think about our message and make sure we have a meaning-based translation. But yeah, it was an awesome class. I would say I would miss it, but I'm just going to see everybody again in the fall for the most part in the senior classes, so it's alright, we'll be okay. But yeah, it was fun. It was good.